So good morning, everybody. Now that we've got everything up and working, it's awesome. So you are the inlet and the outlet. In his New Thought Classic, which we have right up here, Prosperity, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore examines abundant living as a way of life. This month we are gathering each week to explore the deep, timeless, and timely ideas contained in this rich, pun intended, book. So, if you're seeking a more fulfilling human experience, a greater understanding of God, and a way to apply the spiritual principles of abundance in all areas of your life, this is the month for you. Turn to someone and ask, is this the month for you?
Is this the month for you? Yes. I said
Absolutely.
What's the consensus?
yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Yes, the consensus is yes. We have a saying in our New Thought teachings. God can only do for us what God can do through us. No truer words have ever been spoken. In other words, we are the inlet and the outlet for and of God. So say that with me. I am the inlet.
I am the inlet.
And the outlet.
And the outlet.
For and of God.
For and of God.
Ernest Holmes writes in Living the Science of Mind, which I have my copy right here. This is right up there with Neville Goddard, I think, in one of the books that I love to read.
The contemporaries.
Exactly, yes. He says, each of us is a fountain of life. There is a God pressure back of each one of us, a life force seeking outlet through our thoughts and acts. There are many fountains, many individuals, but only one God. Pressure back of all. Each one is an inlet to the divine, can inhibit its flow. Each one of us is an inlet to the divine, but because we are individuals, we can inhibit its flow. We can block it or squeeze it down to a small volume or even stop it. Or by opening up all the channels of faith and conviction and hope, we can increase its flow. When the natural joy of life is unblocked, it will flow freely through us, and we shall become whole and happy. So here's an example, a little story about how it works, sort of. There once was a little boy who wrote a letter to God. A postal worker found the envelope addressed to God, written in a child's handwriting, and he opened it and he read the letter. Probably not a legal thing to do, but he did it, right? Dear God, my daddy has been sick and we have no money to pay the rent or buy food. God, please send us $500. With gratitude, your friend Tommy. The postal worker was so touched that he took the letter to his fellow postal workers, creating an opportunity for people to give to this cause. Within a week, $300 had been collected. He put the $300 in an envelope and delivered it to the boy's house. 2 days later, another letter addressed to God arrived at the post office. This letter read, Dear God, thank you very much for the $300. But next time, would you send the money directly to us? If you send it through the post office, they deduct $200.
Oh my gosh. I like that story.
Well, you, like Johnny in the post office, are both an inlet and an outlet for the divine and for all the aspects of the divine, including this thing we call abundance in all forms. Love, peace, joy, help, ideas, money, purpose, etc., etc. How wide are your inlet and outlet pipes? How wide? It's also been said, how big is your bucket, right? Will they let all of the good through, or only $300 of the $500? Will they let it all come? If they are not as wide as you would like them to be, then today's the day to expand them. Let's start with learning how to live the definition of abundance. And the definition of abundance consciousness. First, Fillmore tells us in a mashup of words on page 68 of his book Prosperity, poverty or prosperity, it all depends on you. All that the Father has is yours, but you alone are responsible for the relationship to the Father's good to your life. Through our souls, God's wealth finds its expression. Wealth of consciousness will express itself in wealth of manifestation. Where does it all begin? It begins in here. Wealth of consciousness. And that's the hardest thing to keep on target, isn't it? Because our minds want to wander. They let things come in. Standing at the portals of our minds is the task at hand. If you were here last week, you will remember Suzanne said she defined abundance consciousness. Does anybody remember her definition of that last week? Suzanne remembers. Okay, part of it is actually our affirmation. It's our affirmation that's on our card, which I got some grumblings from. But I really wanted it to sink in. That's why I decided to use it as our affirmation. So I'm sure you're going to recognize it. And I really, really wanted it to be something that you could take with you and just pick up and read throughout the month. So you can get one of those cards. So I want to take a moment right now, and I just want to be in silence. Just remain in the silence. Take a deep breath. And second, unlock your hearts and minds as you read over the definition, which we have turned into affirmative statements. And I have them up here. Just be with them. Breathe them. Just breathe them in and embody them. Okay, let's read them together, okay? Today, I live in abundance consciousness, meaning I think from, feel from, believe from, speak from, act from, and react from a place that says, from substance I was created. In substance I live and move and have my being. By substance I am fed and prospered. This spiritual substance is steadfast and immovable, enduring, ever the same, constant, abundant, freely circulating, and available. All right.
All right is right.
I like that last word, and available.
And available all the time. Because we know that God is good all of the time. All the time. There's no on or off switch there. When you embody these ideas and truly live from them, you will have created a wealthy consciousness, a place where we know we are manifesting machines, right? Which in turn will express itself in wealth of manifestation to you and through you. Because we don't hold on to anything. We are that outlet. We allow the continued flow there. The second way that we can widen our inlet and outlet pipes is by realizing that God's got your back. And you've got to get into the game. So let me say that again because it's really important. God's got your back, but you've got to get into the game. This idea relates to these words in prosperity. When we have given ourselves entirely to Spirit, we may do things without knowing exactly why. That is because faith is at work in us. And even if we do not know the law and cannot explain faith to the outer consciousness, it continues to do its perfect work and eventually brings forth the demonstration. Sometimes it's even a demonstration that we didn't know we needed, right? Let me give you an example that was shared by one of my teachers. This was such a good example. I have a lot of little ones, but this one was really, really something. And actually there's two examples. One is what happened when she didn't pay attention, and one is when she did. I'll tell you the one when she didn't pay attention after this one. So this was my friend Reverend Michelle, and she tells a story of when she was scheduled to travel to Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And she was going to go to this retreat that she'd been looking forward to. And well over a month before she was to leave, she thought, oh my, Calgary is a foreign country, isn't it? Canada, it's not exactly here. I need my passport. I wonder when it expires. Oh, not for years, I'm sure of it. And she left it at that. A few days later, she thought that again, but she didn't act on it because she was quite sure that her passport didn't expire for years. Now let's pause here for a moment and be reminded of Phil Moore's words. When we have given ourselves entirely to Spirit, we may do things without knowing exactly why. This is the part about us needing to get in the game. We have to do the thing. We have to be paying attention. That's because faith is at work in us, and even if we do not know the law and cannot explain faith to our outer consciousness, it continues to do its perfect work and eventually brings forth the demonstration. So, the demonstration for Reverend Michelle was to get to Canada. Spirit nudged her twice to look at her passport, but she just, I'm sure it's good. I know I've got years and years on that. She didn't do the thing. She didn't get in the game. The universe was trying to get her attention, trying to get her to Calgary, but she was not doing her part because she saw no compelling reason to look at her passport. It didn't expire for years. She was sure of it. Then Spirit took a different tact. She had the thought to get out all all of her travel documents and put them in order so that she would be sure not to forget them. So yes, she paid attention to that. But as I'm sure that you're already figured out, there was a bigger reason to pay attention to that, because when she did get it, she found out that it was a mere 8 days before she was supposed to leave on this trip, right? She glanced to see how many more years she had left on her passport before it expired, and she said aloud, "Holy," well, I'm not gonna, I won't say what followed holy, but you can imagine what she might have said when she saw that it had expired 2.5 years previously. So she had years on it, but the wrong way. Her first reaction was a very, very, very big, "Oh my God," right? Followed by the realization that she was not going to get to Canada, to Calgary, for her workshop, and she'd already paid for it. For her airline tickets, she'd already paid and purchased the workshop that she really wanted to go to. In other words, as we often do, she went into fear. Oh my gosh, I've really messed up. But as a religious science minister, she's been trained to not hang out in fear for very long. So after letting herself feel it momentarily, she did a prayer and immediately got the guidance to find out what she could do to rectify this. How could she fix this? And of course, she listened to this. She listened to what her intuition or faith was telling her this time. Fillmore says, when we have given ourselves entirely to Spirit, at least in part, this means listening to Spirit's voice and then doing what? Following it. Following what Spirit is telling us to do. And had she heeded it the first time, the process would have been so much simpler for her to get her passport renewed. But as it was, because Spirit always has our backs and is always conspiring for her and our greatest good, she got more than one chance. But she had to listen, and then she had to be willing to do the work that was required. So just 8 days before flying to Canada, she found out what she needed to do to get her passport renewed and expedited, right? She found out that she had to make a personal appearance at the regional passport office to get it renewed. Okay, this was probably about 100 miles or so from where she lived. And she's like, okay, sure, absolutely, no problem. I'm happy to do that. So 1 week before she was to fly out of the country, she took a road trip and she went to the passport office to get her passport renewed. And now it's good for another 10 years. Maybe she needs to mark that on her phone. I don't know if you could. I don't know that I'd have the same phone in 10 years, but how do you mark 10 years in advance, right?
Transfer data to the new phone.
There you go. Transfer it all to the new phone. So the point of this story is that God always has our backs, but we have to pay attention and take the appropriate action. In other words, we have to get ourselves in the game. The other story was my next door neighbor, who had been excitedly planning her trip to Nicaragua, and she's a teacher, so she had to wait till she got out of school, and they were packed and they were all ready to go to the airport, and she checked her passport and it had expired the year before. Now she'd had those nagging thoughts of, I wonder if my passport's still good, off and on, but she'd been so busy as a teacher finishing up the school year that she pushed that aside. Of course, she waited until the morning she was leaving, and it was too late to take care of that. So it's a good thing to pay attention to those little messages that come along the way. So let me share with you one final way in which we widen our inlet and outlet pipes. In another mashup from Prosperity, Fillmore writes, "The great promise of prosperity is that if we seek God and his righteousness first, then all shall be added unto us." One of the most practical and sensible ways of seeking God's kingdom first is to put God first in our finances. When we put God first in our finances, not only in thought but in every act, by releasing our first fruits to the Lord, our faith in omnipresent supply becomes 100-fold stronger, and we prosper accordingly. Obeying this law gives us an inner knowing that we are building our finances on a sure foundation that will not fail us. This is from Prosperity. It is the promise of God, the logical thing to do, and the experience of all who have tried it, that all things necessary to their comfort, welfare, and happiness have been added to them in an overflowing measure. So we talked about tithing last August, and I'm not going to go a whole lot into it. But the reason we talk about it is because it is a proven spiritual tool that we teach here for successful living. And, I really don't have to say much about this topic today, but I do want to share 2 quick ideas with you and then a story. First of all, we're probably all very familiar with the Prove Me Now tithing challenge that God gave as it appears in Malachi 3:10. This was Edwene Gaines's big push in her book, the four Spiritual Laws of Abundance, which is just such an amazing book. I love Edwene Gaines. It is a powerful challenge and promise. But did you know, and this was something I did not know, but did you know that before God made the challenge to us, Jacob, who was at a very low point in his life, made a challenge to God? Actually, the scripture says he made a covenant with God in which he asked for prosperity, guidance, peace of mind, and reconciliation with his family. In turn, he made a promise to God. He said, "Of all that thou shalt give me, I will give the 10th to thee." And it seems that God took Jacob up on the deal because he blessed him with all of those things that he had asked for. Catherine Ponder, in Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, writes, "It is little wonder that Jacob became one of the Bible's earliest millionaires." Those who tithe, taking God as their financial partner today, realize that this is a holy alliance and will help them to prosper in just and orderly ways, just as it did Jacob. The second thing I wanted to say about tithing is a very interesting phenomenon that I've experienced and countless people have as well. If we give 10% off of the top to God's work and workers, we'll never feel it. But if we wait to give 10% off the bottom, we will never do it.
You won't be there to do it.
That's true.
You won't be there to do it.
Yeah, well, just think about it just for a moment. If we give 10% to the top to God's work and workers, we never feel it. But if we wait and give 10% off the bottom, we will never do it. When I taught Fun Day School, we called it Fun Day School for the kids back in up in Sacramento. I used M&Ms, the little mini M&Ms, to show our young ones how this worked. So one Sunday, each child would get 10 M&Ms, and we would ask for one back as a tithe. Happily, they handed us the one, and then they were free to go about the rest of the morning and eat the other 9. They probably ate more than that too. But anyway, the next week they again got 10 of these little M&Ms. And this time they were told to eat 9, but they were told to save one at the very end to give us. And I will tell you, after eating 9, and your taste buds are going, wah, right? It was much more difficult for those little ones to hand back that last one. It was a really good way to explain how easy it is when you, and there's another book that is absolutely, Rich and I read this when we first got married. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it is truly, it is a great book for,
It's like a movie, but yeah.
well, it's a good book on building wealth and tithing. And he takes it one step further. You take 10% off the top for God. You take another 10% for you. You tithe to God, you tithe to yourself. Because his belief is that if you can live on 100%, you can live on 90%. And if you can live on 90%, you can live on 80%. It's amazing because then you're building up your savings. It's a pretty interesting philosophy.
What's the name of it?
The Richest Man in Babylon.
Okay.
Great book. And again, we never require anyone to do anything. We're not like some of the churches that, check in at your house and look at your tax returns. That's not us. That is not us. We just offer the spiritual tools that work, and we share them because they've worked for us. They have worked for us. And, it's just something that, when you find something that works, you want to share it. It's really pretty cool. So we've all heard those amazing testimonials over the years. And I know if Thelma was here today, she'd be telling me Suzanne's testimonials again. And the idea is that if it's true for one, it must be true for all. If it's true for one, it must be true for all. So how do we be wider inlets and outlets for God's good? We live from, fully embrace, and embody abundance consciousness. We give ourselves entirely to Spirit by listening and following divine guidance. And we put God first in our finances through the high and holy spiritual practice of tithing. In these ways, we can have a more fulfilling human experience, a greater understanding of God, and greater abundance in all areas of our lives. How blessed shall we be? How blessed shall we be? How blessed are we right now? And how does it get any better than this? And so it is.
So it is.